Alrighty. Well, I'm on my way to the gym. I just got off work. A little bit of a slow day for the most part, but it is what it is. Like, I'll go to the gym, go home, eat some dinner, maybe play some fucking Xbox. Who knows? Really depends on the mood. Sometimes if I don't want to do that, I just go ahead and watch YouTube. Because why not? And now you get to see my drive home. Or not really home, but, what I do when I'm not on the way to work. Because my previous videos, my only 2 videos that I've had up so far, have always just been me on my way to my work. So, but not right now. So, we're going to go ahead. And where the hell did that go? Oh. Alright. Yeah, that's the one thing you do got to worry about, though, with this car, is that, and I'm at stock height, right? So I'm at stock height, and even then, the air dam, which I know it's supposed to scrape and do all that. It's meant to be there, and it's made of rubber so that it can actually still do whatever it needs to do without being absolutely wrecked. But it still sucks hearing it, I still hear it. I know there's ways to, I guess, not need it, right? There's some of them where they have cutouts and basically adaptations of turning this car from a bottom breather into a front breather, right? Where they put the holes where the fog lights are and that center portion whether you have a front plate or just a center plate, I guess. I don't know how to really call that, but for that, I think it's, I'm trying to think who makes it. I don't think it's Corvette Creations. I got to see who made it. I can't really think of it, but there's one fucking company, I guess, that makes that. Obviously, you'll have to, if you know how to do it right, you just kind of cut holes into your shroud, into the radiator shroud. You cut holes into it, and then it just directs air straight into the radiator, just dead on, right? So then air dam doesn't necessarily need to be there, or you can trim it. I think the only thing at that point that the radiator can do from a cooling aspect is it can, I guess, kind of help, right? It'll still redirect the air back up and whatnot. I think the only purpose of the radiator at that point would be to maintain any sort of aerodynamics that this car has, right? It'll try to maintain what the car does, but I think if you're just daily driving it like me, I don't think you really need it. I don't personally think. Unless you really think you do, if you just don't really want to hear that scraping noise that it does here and there in certain bumps, then okay, that's your choice. The same thing goes for the C6. If you're tracking it, that one's a different thing, I would say. I think it really depends on what you have, what your car has set up. If you're just straight up tracking the Corvette, I would think it'd be a good idea to kind of make it a front breather through the bumpers, and remove the air dam and maybe put some sort of splitter instead, right? But at the same time, like I said, the air dam's other thing besides it being a factor for cooling of the way this car was engineered to be. Besides that, I think it'll play a role into your aerodynamics. Now, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I don't think anyone's truly been able to actually figure that out for anyone who's obviously brave enough to really just make this the track, right? Because yes, it's expensive, right? Like tracking the car over and over and over again, whether you're doing it for drag racing or whether you're going in circuits, right? Whether you do it either way, I don't care. I don't really care. I feel like obviously if you're taking on a circuit, you've got to pay much more attention from a aerodynamic standpoint. Can you take these corners fast, like as fast as possible? Because the C5s are like already pretty aerodynamic as they are, right? Like C5 and C6 are not that far apart in terms of aerodynamics. Obviously, every little thing can count. The C6 is more aerodynamic and is faster. All right, it's got more, which should be the case for any Corvette. It's got more, like, I guess, readjustment or fine tunes, right? They've like kind of readjusted whatever flaw the C5 was, whatever flaw the C5 had. They would try to mitigate that flaw with the C6, right? They would try to fix whatever was going on, which obviously I don't think they would do that. Maybe for the Z06 versions, sure, right? They were like, those guys would track it, which, yes, whatever they did, obviously, I get power difference, cool. But I think it speaks more than just power, right? Understand that C6 Z06 has literally 100 more horsepower than the C5. And their weights, like the weight that they are, there's literally there's a 12-pound difference between the two. Like the C5, ever since they did the, basically the C4 from and onward, I would say, like those cars and tracking, like the C4 weighs about 3,500 or so pounds. The C5 the C4 ZR1. The C5 Z06s weigh, it's like the C6 Z06. C5 and C6, they're both 3,100 pounds. The only difference is that I think there's like a 12-pound difference between the two, and that's the C5 weighing, or C6 weighing literally 12 pounds more. So I'm like, I know weight can matter at some point, but at the same time, look, there's a 12-pound gap between these two, but there's also a 100 horsepower gap between these two. Yeah, so I don't think that 12 pounds is really going to do much to the C6. I think the C6, will rock, and it showed in the Nürburgring. I'm like, if I can think of it off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure the C6 quite literally wiped the floor with the C5. It went, I think it was like 35 seconds faster, because I think the C5 did it in like 7:57 in the Nürburgring, and the C6 did it in 7:20 or 7:22. I think it was 7:22. So, I'm like, yeah, that's ridiculous, right? That is, especially for that time period, that is very fast. Yeah, I would think at a certain point it really depends on what you want. And look, for me, I'm like, I know some people, they'll complain and say this, that, or the other about like, oh, you have you should have gotten this Corvette or this. I'm like, dude, if you really want to tell other people what they should have gotten, how about you go get it? You know what I mean? Like, let people do what they want with their money. Not everyone will track. Not everyone's going to build this 1,000 horsepower Corvette. No, dude, Mike. Not everyone is into that. Two, not everyone has that kind of money, and even if they did, they might be interested in buying maybe some other things in their life, right? They just want to have the car that they like. But I don't know, people always seem to just like really dog on the automatics as well. Like they just, like, especially guys who like to race. So whenever it's like just actual car show guys, they seem pretty chill about it, right? Obviously the pros and cons of both transmissions, cool. So I'm not one to really judge whichever one you get, as long as you get your car, bud. Like, what if it makes you feel happy? That's what I'm glad to hear that. Like, obviously the C5 never really had a crazy like transmission, right? Like you had the T56, that one was about as best as you could get. The automatics, they were limited. Buildable, yes, very buildable. It's a 4L60s, which 4L60s on the C5s were built slightly different because, well, it's for a C5. It's not for a regular car. It's built for one of their sports cars. Pretty much Chevy's like top dog. So yes, they give it the servo. Internals are like from anything I've read, it's literally ever so slightly stronger than the regular 4L60s on the other cars, but it's not like overwhelmingly like different where you can really put like, no, you still gotta limit it on how much torque this transmission can do. Like the trans can only handle so much. So I don't recommend obviously if you have an automatic C5, I don't recommend going crazy with it unless you get either build it yourself or get a built 4L60, right? If you get a built 4L60, that thing will move, right? And obviously get the diff changed. The diff is fine in this car. It's fine for what the car can do. Now, if you're trying to go full-blown power build, yes, I recommend targeting those two first before you even touch the engine. You can say touching the engine is great, but can everything else back it up, right? So you got to take all these things into account. You got to make sure the car can also maintain its, like I've stated even before, like you got to make sure the car can maintain a good cooling system. Make sure it doesn't just overheat and do everything like that. Try to make sure it can maintain power under good temperatures. Like make power reliably. Because you want to be able to track it and still be able to be fine afterwards, which that's what these engines, can do. LS1, LS6, they can do that. Which was nice, right? LS1, LS6, the parts are very interchangeable, so it's not super difficult to find parts like performance parts. It's not like you don't have to really look specific for certain things on the C5. You just put a C5 in, done, right? Done. Parts are interchangeable, great. C6s, obviously you got to put your trims in what year, because you have 4 different engines on that car, right? You had the LS2, 3, 7, and LS9. So yeah, that car came with its interesting quirks. Obviously for me, most people will always say in terms of for the price, if you're gonna go tracking, obviously most of the time, more than likely, the manual transmissions are almost always the better option if you're going around circuits, right? And yeah, that can be true, especially if you're gonna go around circuit tracking and you have a C5, highly recommend grabbing the that T56 off of the regular ones or the Z06, whichever one. I just recommend that one, right? Because unless you can have a way where you can manually shift your 4L60s, cool. But even then, I think I think the T56 will destroy around the track with the right driver, which obviously that's a key part. But in general, it should. The C6s, which excluding the 05, don't recommend that one to be honest. The 6L80s and the either T56 or TR6060. So either 6-speed manual. I'd recommend more than likely the manuals. More than likely, just because only reason being, I think they're geared better for track use. I mean, even the 6L80 is not a terrible. I would not say it's a terrible transmission. I'm not gonna say it's like the god of gods. No. But I wouldn't really count that one out. If you're able to do, I think on the 6L80s, if you're able to do either a tune specifically for the trans, right, and kind of up those shift points a little bit, maybe firm it up a bit more, or do a shift kit, or do both, And say if you can do a shift kit, a shift kit or a tune or both, whichever one you choose. I think either of the three will work just fine for that car. Even a shift kit will really do it. Which I'd say don't quote me on it, but I don't think you need to tune the car for certain shift kits. I think certain shift kits you will have to reprogram that transmission. For certain ones, no, it's just more of like a plug and play, like just go with it. So you're gonna have to do your research on that one for the C6s. But I think if you do it right, if you get someone to do it correctly, I think that 6L80 can be competitive. I think the only thing that may be holding it back at that point would be the diff, right? Like your final drive. If you have the sport option, which I think the sport option in that one is 273 instead of 256 on a final drive. 273, obviously, on a 6-speed is much better. I don't know, unless you want to go full blown and just get it straight up redone and get like some 315s or 342s, cool, right? But I think you can try to get a shift kit and hopefully you have a 276 or 273. Hopefully you have that final drive and then shift kit, tune, cool, right? I think the power will follow. The engine already has the power to get it down. I think even in their stock form, right? They flow relatively good, right? I'm not going to say they're like excellent, right? There's definitely better versions, but from their stock formation, they are quick vehicles. C6 is pretty much just a roided up version of the C5, because the C5 and C6 weigh about the same. They're not far apart in weight, and you've got about a 90 to 100 horsepower difference on every trim level. Because you go from base to base of at least the LS3. The LS2s, there's a 50 horsepower gap, which even then you could feel a difference as an owner of a C5 and then you jump into an LS2 of a C6. Like, you will feel the difference between the two. If you have a C6 Z06 or C5 Z06, okay, then you might have to step it up a notch in terms of if you want to feel the difference between one or the other. But in terms of just their base forms, the C5 is C6. It is a night and day difference. One just has much more get up and go with the same weight, right? Like if you go LS3, which obviously seems to be most people, I think would be that'd be the engine to have. All right, I know there's LS7, cool, right? LS7s in terms of the port injector world, cool, but I think the LS3 is kind of just, it's nice, right? It's a good mid ground. Nothing crazy for someone who's never tracked it fully. But yeah, obviously, if you have the LS7 and everything's been done to it, that could be a good engine. For what do you call it? God dang, that's right. That's a long way. Yeah, for tracking, I think it's nice for either of them. If you can get it down, I would. That'd be great, to be honest. Now, for the only one that's different, I would say, even though it's the same set of front engine, torque tube, all that goodness, you've got basically what should be the perfect version for the Corvettes, right? The C7. The C7, I think, is obviously once they figured out that this is going to be the final Corvette that uses this setup of a near 50-50 weight distribution or just right at it. I think yes, the C7 was built specifically to be basically everything that the C5 and C6 could not be, right? Like, that's what the C7 is. It is every, like, engine, trans, whatever the case is. Obviously, it sucks in terms of from a stock formation for the trans. The engine's fine, I would think, right? I think for the most part, the C7 engines are quite stout. They're good from an engineering standpoint, and even engine builders. From everything I've read, I'm like, that LT1 off the C7 from power for power is obviously significantly stronger than the C6. It can do more. Now, is it the same price? No, right? It being a direct injected engine and compared to what the C5 and C6 had in terms of the port injected world, yeah, it's not going to be a cheap thing. It's never going to be cheap. And that's engine, trans, everything about the C7, like I said, is supposed to be the most advanced version of what the C5 and C6 could not be because of the time period that they were in. I think same thing for the C7. Only thing that sucks with the C7 is obviously if you have AFM. Now, if you get that deleted off the automatics, cool. I think the manuals are supposed to have them, but literally only in one mode. The C7s autos, or the manuals have it in eco mode. The automatics have it in, I think, almost every mode except paddle shift mode. If you put the C7 and just paddle shift it, then that one, no, it turns off AFM, which is nice, right? But even then, if you just want to be able to just drive freely without having to paddle shift everything all the time, if you have the automatics of the C7s, I would recommend obviously deleting AFM or have some sort of AFM delete thing. But obviously, if you just get it deleted completely, yeah, that'd be your best bet. 8L90s. That'd be an interesting transmission right there. When it works, it's a stout transmission. When it's obviously does its whatever it does, which it likes to shutter, do all this and that, all this recall, even if you get the transmission fluid changed, I would still highly recommend getting a shift kit. Again, I like to just push that a little bit forward, putting a shift kit in any of the automatics, whether you have the C4s, 4L, or C5s, 4L60, the 6L80 and the C6, or the 8L90s and the C7s. I'd recommend getting a shift kit, just mainly for, obviously it should feel nicer, right? But at the same time, it should also increase your transmission's lifespan, right? It should not be slipping as much because you're putting more pressure on the shift ones. Like, the transmissions can actually get to it, like, just quick, right? Like, just snap onto it. Cool. For the C7s, I think if you get a shift kit or a tune or both, like the same thing as any of the other ones, I think, yeah, that 8L90, when done right, yeah, that could be a crazy, crazy car for tracking. Because I'm like, I know the 7-speed is, again, it's a stout transmission. Those TR6070s, and it's pretty much the Tremix, they're just good at doing those transmissions. For that one, yeah, that'd be an interesting transmission. I think I would like to say around the track, I think the 8L90 off the C7s is probably quicker than the 7-speeds. In general, with the right driver, dependent. But in theory, it should be faster, right? You get the right things going on that C7, and that thing will rock your world. So, but yeah. Shift kits, I would feel very much adamant about it. Just, trying to really look into that. If you have an automatic, if you have a manual, the only thing I really have to recommend for the manuals is getting a, and if you're just driving around town, okay. But if you're daily driving it like me, the crazy fucking person that I am, I would say, yeah, try to get a cooling system upgrade. So a cooling system upgrade would be ideal for these cars. So I know they're supposed to be running hot, but I'm not a fan. So, but alright though, I'm about to head to the gym. You guys have a great rest of your day. I'm out.